So for me, the last 5, 6 years have been very tumultuous. Lots of emotional processing, circumstances changing, situations changing, lots of shadow work, different structures of identity falling, others showing up that I didn't know were there. They were still buried. And all in all, it's just been energetically really, really fierce. So as it feels for me like I'm moving through the tail end of this phase and into something different, which it's always changing, right? This is always changing. And what I'm struck by is how excessively fierce that we can be with things like inquiry and shadow work. And I myself was extremely fierce. I've made a video about it, I don't know, a month or so ago. And I tearfully recounted what that was like, to have to extend that to somebody else or try to extend it to somebody else and watch it fail miserably. And what's becoming clearer and clearer here is that there's really a time and a place for everything. I used to be very afraid of leaving my videos, of abandoning my inquiry, of stopping the sense that I needed to keep pushing and applying pressure and efforting into my shadow side. And as a direct result, I think I put myself through more than I needed to. And it was interesting to see the identity sneak in those arenas to say, oh, you have to keep going, to believe a thought structure that said, it said, if you don't dig into this right now, that you're not doing your job, that you're not doing it right, that you need to keep going. And I pushed myself to failure and exhaustion so many times. And as I was talking with my partner yesterday, it became really obvious that she occupies a different space than I do. And I had been very, very resistant to it because I felt like I needed to be very strong, that I needed to be some kind of hero, that I needed to be some kind of warrior, that I needed to really just keep pushing and pushing. And as this conversation, this beautiful conversation unfolded, there was a switch. And it went from me wanting to continue to apply pressure or make a statement or wanting to establish an identity, even though it was a very, very subtle identity. It was an identity of all the things, of having some kind of stripes down my sleeve like somebody in the military, or having some kind of badge of honor like I had done so much shadow work. It's silly now. I laugh at it now. And what came up instead was it settled into silence, and there was this exploration into the space in which everything was happening. And it felt very, very different for us. Now, I generally find myself in a state of sort of what we'll say is presence or here-ness or now-ness. But this was very, very different. And what I realized and I began to see is two things. One is that when we get around other people, that these identities, these little identity structures will show up. And they're very, very subtle. And they can even look like awakened identities or enlightened identities. And then we project that and we want to display and show as if to have the recognition come back to us to say, yeah, you've got it. You're on to it. You're doing the right thing. You're on the right path. And I'm smirking the whole time because it feels so silly to, after the fact, to kind of say it that way. It feels really strange. So I'm in this state of presence, but when you get around another person, it kind of eliminates that. And the second thing was, is it became really obvious that we can push too hard in our efforts. That for those of us that are really tenacious, that are really burning, that really want to go deep and to eradicate whatever it is that we think is shadow work, which in actuality can sometimes be resistance to what's happening, that we rarely stop and we rarely notice the space in which all of this stuff is unfolding. So we stopped and shared this space, and it was just quiet for a little while, just a little bit of conversation back and forth. And what came up out of it was just this beautiful, spontaneous sharing. And it really didn't have a lot of information packed into it. It was a sort of a reporting back, I guess, of a present state. It was a reminder of what's already here. It was a gentle dropping of any sense of needing to communicate in a specific way so as to show that either one of us had it all together or that we knew what was going on. And the damnedest thing happened was is that the space itself seemed to open up, and I began to warm up, and then she began to warm up. And it was this indescribable just merging. And I noticed for me, and you might call that, some folks might call that unity consciousness. I've noticed for me that these states seem to be, or these senses seem to be really accessible when I'm by myself. I can be walking somewhere and have the whole thing blow wide open. Just, like, wow, literally a childlike wonder. And then soon as I get around other people, that identity will want to come up, and it will say things like, based on my traumatic history, it will say things like, not safe, can't trust, don't share, don't be open, close off, let the gates fall, close the doors, raise the drawbridge, light the moat on fire. And it wasn't until that moment that I really felt, while I was in presence with another, while there were two human bodies in a room, where it really felt like all of that just got completely eliminated. And so as we sat there chatting and just loosely just letting this flow happen, it became very obvious that there's a time and place for everything. That it can be very, very easy for the identity to want to take up the mantle of, I'm doing shadow work. I'm doing the work now. And it also becomes very clear in the same moment that the person, the sense of identity, the structure that we call ourselves, which is really nothing more than just thoughts, ideas, projections, memories, and habits. And the person itself can never do all the work. It never really does any of the work if you want to go the full purist route. But when it feels like there is an us there, that it can never really do all of the work. And generally, it's going to leave us, and it left me for a long time, in a state of clenching, of extra efforting, of trying to get somewhere else, of trying to grasp, even at this work. And it looks so noble or correct or spiritual. It reads well on paper. I'm digging into my shadow work. When what seems to actually be happening is there's still that identity attempting to reify itself, attempting to even do things as subtle as hide and guard behind the guise of doing things like shadow work or having a spiritual conversation. I don't remember anything spiritual about what we said. It was just direct presence. It was what it feels like to be in just this open space that it felt like I kept saying it was a not TED. It was a not TED. And if we're constantly moving through this shadow stuff all the time and not giving ourselves a break, then it's like we're not taking a moment to stop. We're not taking time to just be. And it can be that the sense of just being comes with too many uncomfortable sensations, too many emotions coming up, too many feelings coming up. But it also can present a silence that we're almost overlooking, a stillness that's always ever present that we just subtly miss, or it feels so unfamiliar that we don't quite know what it is because it's quiet. And silence doesn't demand 24/7 shadow work. It doesn't demand that we have 3 hours or whatever, perfect meditation. It just is. And when it seems like that is what fills up the entire room, it's very, very clear that the person doesn't need to apply pressure, that the person doesn't need to effort. And that's not to say that shadow work or the appearance of effort or the courage that's needed to look at and feel the emotions isn't necessary. Not even a little bit. It's just that it's not necessary all the time, that stopping is actually safe, that taking a break is also home, that the stillness is not a threat, that the quiet is our true nature. I think I lost sight of that for a while. I definitely think I lost sight of that, where there was something in an identity that was only allowing me tiny moments of it, like little breadcrumbs, like the 10 minutes before I fall asleep, or in the 15 minutes it takes me to walk from my house to work. Then I can give myself permission to just be. But anywhere else where an uncomfortable emotion comes up and it's pounce on it with ferocity. Seeing the silence without feeling the effort to even notice the silence left me in a state that I wouldn't even call as unguarded, because unguarded implies that there's something to guard against. It left me in a state that I can only describe as a vulnerability that had no boundaries, that I could reach out, like an intimacy and openness that I could reach out and never find the edges of. And there seemed to be, anytime that I've ever touched into this, which has been quite often over the years, that there's this strange, still invitation, almost like a voice that says, here, you can live here. You can function from this place. This is home. And in that, functioning from that place, it doesn't matter what's happening. And not in a dismissive way, of course, but I'm angry, okay, anger. If I'm in distress, okay, distress. If I'm in bliss or joy or feeling just very neutral, sort of even, almost flat, okay. It didn't make any demands. And yet it was different, very different than efforting to get to this place, to try to create that stillness and then hold it and then try to carry it with me to get up to walk around the day and use this as another lens through which I view things, or use this as my map or my guide or my compass. It wasn't manufactured at all. And that soft invitation says, stay here. And I noticed over the years when it would come up, it was very perturbing. I was talking about this last night, that it would come up and I would feel that strong invitation and that sense of yes, that rightness, that yesness that would come through and would sort of be there for, I don't know, a minute, day, week. And then as soon as it closed down, it, or appeared to close down, it was as if I had completely forgotten it. I didn't even have anything that I could look back on to say, oh, I wish I could go back there. I didn't notice that until it came to the foreground more and more and more and more, and finally presented itself as now it's time. And in conjunction with that, being in that identity has, for me, become very painful, very uncomfortable, very clenchy. It was described to me as a general mild state of discomfort, as just something isn't quite right. But the intensity with which the emotions showed up when I would flip flop back and forth in between this sort of open, non-judgmental, presency type of vulnerable space. Vulnerable is the only word I can use. I guess you could say intimate too, or you could say loving. There's lots of words we could put on there, but it's ultimately indescribable. That the flip flopping going from that space into the other one started to just really be so uncomfortable that there was no other choice than to overcome this little sense of fear, this little sense of doubt, even that says, I don't know if I can operate from this space. I don't know if this space is safe. As I was saying last night, was operating from that space means that how the body responds, how the person responds is very, very different. Very different. I feel 4,000 times softer. Nothing seems to bother me. And I don't mean that there isn't reactions. Bother me meaning I'm not bothered if I'm angry. I'm not bothered if I'm sad. I'm not bothered with any of the emotions that might head my way. And everything turns into this great sense of I amness, this isness without a center, this quiet shouting from anything and everything in the room, from the bottle of sriracha I'm staring at right now, the unmade bed over there, what it feels like to have my butt sitting in a chair, any and everything. It's quite beautiful. I think there was a regular type of movement towards this, and sort of relentless. And there was an exhaustion that came with pushing so hard for shadow work. And again, I don't want to say that I think that that was bad. So much of it seemed beneficial in the moment that it was coming up, that it was helping me regulate my nervous system, which has been through so much, to sort of still the waters. And then I guess when the waters got still enough, it just wanted to settle. And for the first time, it did it with another person. So take breaks. I think the breaks are okay. I think following the natural sense of it, I can stop. I can just be. I can just sit. I can just effortlessly notice this presence, this space, this aliveness that's always here. And I can rest there. Because when we're doing all this shadow work, we're doing all of the pushing and pulling and efforting and meditating and all the other things that we do on the path, we're really looking for rest. I know it felt for me. I want to come to rest. I want to just occupy this space. And then not Ted wants to be in this space. And whether there is or isn't a Ted is an irrelevant discussion in that spot. It's almost, it's just it's a non-debate. It's just this. So take those breaks. If there's something like a presence practice you do, or an effortless noticing, or just kind of a conscious going, let me just put the brakes on this for a minute. All is well. Do that. Because the shadow stuff will come up on its own. It'll definitely, if it's got some momentum, it'll show up on its own and it'll do its thing. In the meantime, take a breather. So that's what I got for today. Thanks, guys.